Good morning. I'm J. Lenora Bressler, and welcome to the February 24th, 2018 edition of The Bible Delight in the Details. Our Jewish brethren are celebrating this week the Feast of Purim. Now, this is not one of the 7 ordained feasts by God in Leviticus, but it is a very God-honoring and frankly a very fun festival. And it's important that we as Christians know about him because it has some very important messages to anyone of faith. Purim celebrates the story of Esther from the Book of Esther. It comes from the days of the Babylonian captivity. You will recall that the northern kingdom of Israel had fallen to the Assyrians, and about 150 years later, the southern kingdom of Judah fell to the Babylonians. Now, the Babylonians were very smart in the way they conquered people. They took the ruling class, including the royal family, and exiled them, took them back to Babylon, where they offered them, frankly, wonderful lives of authority and respect in the Babylonian government. And so it came to pass that a very brilliant Jewish man by the name of Mordecai came to a very high official position in the Babylonian government under a man named Haman, who was basically the prime minister under the king at the time. Now, Haman was a very evil man. He was grasping and greedy and power hungry, and he developed a great hatred for Mordecai, because although Mordecai was extremely good at his job and was very well respected by other members of the government, he refused to give Haman the fawning, flattering, sycophantic kind of adulation that he required, because Mordecai felt that to do that would be to rob his Lord of God's glory. Now, so therefore, Haman had it out for Mordecai. So Haman was very upset when something happened, very ironically. The king could not sleep one night, and he called for the official records of the kingdom to be brought to him. And in his reading, he learned that Mordecai, several years before, had actually saved the life of the king and shown himself to be very loyal. But for whatever reason, this had gotten lost, and he had never been rewarded or recognized. So the next day, the king, without using Mordecai's name, asked Haman what he thought should be done for a very loyal servant of the king who had proved his loyalty. Haman mistakenly thought he was referring to him, and so he said, he should be given jewels, and he should be put on a horse and led through town and a parade. Well, to his chagrin, it turned out that it was his enemy, Mordecai, who was so honored. This only enraged Haman more, and he knew he was out to get now not only Mordecai, but he wanted to wipe the Jewish people off of the earth. As he continued to scheme how to do that, things were happening in the royal palace. The queen was doing some behavior which the king interpreted as disrespect both to himself and to the kingdom. And so he deposed her and exiled her, opening it up for him to do a nationwide search for a new queen. And it so happened that Mordecai's ward, who had a Jewish name but is better known to history as Esther, became the queen. Meanwhile, Mordecai, he did a very evil thing. He lied to the king and tricked the king into signing an edict whereby the Jews throughout the empire were going to be killed and their properties confiscated on a certain day. In fact, Haman was so excited about this that he had a gallows made in his own backyard so that he could have a front row seat to the killing of Mordecai himself. Now, the killing date was set for a period in the future, a date in the future. Mordecai, afraid for the whole nation of Israel, went to Queen Esther and said those famous words, Perhaps you were born for just such a moment as this, and urged her to go to the king, reveal her real identity, and beg for the lives of her people. Now, this was very dangerous because, number one, there was no guarantee that the fact that she was a Jew would save her in any way. In fact, it might condemn her. And second of all, going to the king without being asked to come into his presence was a capital offense, even for the queen. But she got her courage up and she went in to the king's court unbidden. He very kindly reached his royal scepter out to her, which was a sign that she had permission to approach. And through a very fascinating series of events, she was able to reveal to the king the evilness of Haman. Haman was not only killed on his own gallows, but his whole family, his sons, were killed with him. Although the king, because of a technicality of Babylonian law, could not reverse his earlier order, he was able, through Mordecai's great wisdom, he was able to solve the problem by issuing a second edict, which allowed the Jews to fight back. And so the Babylonians did not dare attack the Jews who had been authorized by the king to protect their lives and their property, and therefore no Jewish person was injured. Why do we need to know about this story and celebrate Purim? Well, there are two things I think that we need to be especially clear on. Number one, disobeying God has very long-ranging and often unknown consequences. You see, way back when Joshua entered the Promised Land, the people from which Haman was descended were one of the ites in the list of ites that the Lord told the Hebrews to kill, to wipe out. And Joshua didn't finish that job, so it fell to Saul. King Saul. King Saul deliberately disobeyed this. And so there were people of that tribe that were allowed to escape, and it was from them that the evil Haman was descended. Second of all, even when we, as the people of God, sin, as the Hebrews did, in not taking out this devoted enemy of the Jewish people, early on when God told them to, God's plans will not be thwarted. You see, had Haman's evil plan been done, the whole royal house, anyone who had a relative connection to King David would have been wiped out. And therefore, the Messiah, a direct descendant of King David, could never have been born. God was not going to let his plan of the Messiah be thwarted. He will never let his plans be thwarted. One last comment. Esther, the Book of Esther, is somewhat controversial because there is no direct statement of God in it. But the implication is very clear. God, or providence, is working constantly behind the scenes to make sure that his plans are not thwarted by mistakes, by sin, or by the evilness of man. And so it is a good thing for us to remember, we are not all going to be given a wonderful revelation, a vision by God, as sometimes the prophets and the great leaders of the past were. But we can always be assured that whether God appears to us and tells us his specific plan or not, he is always working behind the scenes to make history his story. I'm J. Lenora Bressler. Visit me on the next edition of the Bible. Delight in the details. Have a great weekend.